Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring a bill to limit bus drivers on local routes to driving for no more than 56 hours in any one week and 90 hours in any 2 consecutive weeks, and for connected purposes. This bill seeks to harmonise UK legislation for bus driving and working hours. It is supported by the Road Safety Pressure Group BRAKE and by the RMT Union, as well as many members in this place. Its origins are in the terrible tragedy that was the bus crash in Coventry in 2015, in which 2 members of the public lost their lives, 7-year-old Rowan Fitzgerald and 76-year-old Dora Hancox. Mr. Speaker, such a tragedy for any family is unimaginable, and may I start by welcoming Rowan's mother Natasha and his grandmother Barbara, who are here with us today. I thank them for their courage and encouragement, knowing that this will be hard for them. The bill has their absolute support. Mr. Speaker, I am not a specialist in transport legislation nor on the Working Time Directive, but avoidable tragedies such as occurred on that fateful day in October 2015 must lead to the review of and changes to existing legislation. On that day, the bus driver was incapable of stopping his vehicle. His foot was pressed on the accelerator. Ultimately, it was the front of the Sainsbury's store in Coventry city centre that brought that bus to a standstill. Rowan Fitzgerald, who was a pupil at St Anthony's School in Sydenham, Leamington, and 76-year-old Dora Hancox of Nuneaton were killed. He was on his way home from watching his beloved Sky Blues, Coventry City. She was walking through the city centre on a shopping visit from Nuneaton. Several others, including Rowan's cousin Paige Wilson, were seriously injured. It was a busy Saturday afternoon in Coventry city centre. A video shown at the inquest revealed how the tragedy could have claimed even more lives. In it, the bus careers across the main road, striking another bus, then lampposts, before hurtling down a pavement and ploughing into a bus stop and then the supermarket. Were it not for the brave actions of Teal Portlock, who managed to disperse the pedestrians outside the Sainsbury's, many others would have been killed or seriously injured. What is most concerning is that there was absolutely an inevitability that such a tragedy would happen. The driver that day was Mr. Chander, and the bus operator was Midland Red, part of Stagecoach Group. Mr. Chander had been driving for the companies for several years and was retained as a relief driver on a casual contract. However, his hours were anything but casual. Although aged 77 years at the time, Mr. Chander worked most days and had worked every day in the 7 days leading to the accident. In the evidence given in court, it was confirmed that the company did not place any restriction on the number of hours he could work, and as one of the controllers based at the Leamington depot put it, if there was a shift available and he wanted it, then he was given it. In consequence, he worked long hours and often worked 5 or 6 days per week, and added that in the year leading up to the fatal accident, Mr. Chander worked an average of 47 hours a week. The statistic disguises the number of hours worked during busy periods, namely in school term time. At these times, he would frequently work in excess of 56 hours per week and could drive school specials. In the 4 weeks leading up to the crash, he had driven 62 hours, 76 hours, 76 hours and 72 hours respectively, an average of 72 hours a week over that period, this despite his shocking driving record. Between 2012 and 2014, the company received 16 written complaints from passengers about his erratic behaviour and the innumerable incidents. By Stagecoach's own measures, he should have been banned. The judge's report provides more insight into these failings and the level of corporate ignorance, stating, on Saturday the 3rd of October, Mr. Chander agreed to swap shifts with another driver, meaning that he was now due to work an 11-hour shift on what is termed a spread over. He agreed to do that, having just completed a working week of 75 hours. In the morning, he was driving a single-decker bus, and, significantly, the CCTV shows him repeatedly rubbing his eyes, as if tired. At approximately 5 p.m, Mr. Chander was waiting to take charge of a double-decker bus. Another driver told him he looked knackered and that he should say no. Mr. Chander ignored that advice and set off, eventually coming to a bus stop on Hale Street in Coventry city centre. At no point during the 11-second journey that followed did the driver engage the foot brake, pressing instead only the accelerator. In passing sentence, the judge concluded that the company was highly culpable and fined them £2.3 million. This was a terrible tragedy, but of course there are many accidents every day. The data shows that there is a fundamental issue here. The fact that the driver had been driving so many long hours leading up to the crash was undoubtedly the critical factor that led to this accident. Currently, however, this is entirely legal under British law, as local bus drivers are not subject to the same working hour regulations as long-distance bus drivers or lorry drivers. Nor do the laws equate to those in the EU. Ours are clearly detrimental to passenger safety. The British laws regulate bus drivers' hours on local routes, i.e. less than 50-kilometre limit driving, to just 10 hours a day, with no weekly or fortnightly limit, except that in any 2 consecutive weeks there must be at least one period of 24 hours off duty. This means that it's entirely legal for a local bus driver to drive 130 hours over a period of 2 weeks. Under EU law, however, a long-distance bus driver or lorry driver cannot drive more than 56 hours a week or more than 90 hours over 2 consecutive weeks. I believe this tragedy could have been avoided potentially if driving hours for local bus drivers were capped at 56 hours a week and no more than 90 hours over any 2 consecutive weeks, as it is already for long-distance bus drivers and HGV drivers. That is the primary purpose of this bill. But the bill also includes proposals for a move to EU regulations, including bus drivers' mandatory breaks, which would ensure a break of no less than 45 minutes be taken after no more than 4.5 hours of driving. The break could be divided into 2 periods, the first at least 15 minutes long and the second at least 30 minutes, taken over the 4.5 hours. At present, the entitlement to a 30-minute break after 5.5 hours behind the wheel often results in drivers taking smaller breaks or none at all due to congestion or other factors beyond their control. Additionally, the changes should be introduced by employers at no detriment to bus drivers' pay. The culture of long hours amongst bus drivers is accompanied by low wage rates, which places a dubious incentive on overtime. Over the past 2 decades, wages have fallen relative to average incomes, and this is causing bus drivers to work nearly 6 hours per week, more than average workers, in order to sustain their incomes to a reasonable level. Regulations must prevent this, but must also ensure that bus drivers are paid properly for the essential public service they provide. This is important at a time when operators are cutting unprofitable routes and local councils are cutting funding to bus services. And then there is also the need for regular independent health checks beyond a driver's GP to ensure fitness for work. I am not the first to propose this. Back in 2015, some months before the Coventry crash, the Right Honourable Member for Islington North and the Right Honourable Member for Hayes-and-Harlington put forward such changes through an early day motion. Coincidentally, earlier that same year, a report was published by the London Assembly Transport Committee that looked into the reasons for bus crashes in London and concluded that Transport for London should commission comprehensive and independent research into bus drivers' working conditions. There were reports that bus drivers could be doing 16-hour shifts without adequate breaks. This was followed up in its 2017 report, Driven to Distraction, that noted high levels of stress are reported amongst bus drivers, caused by long shifts, inadequate breaks and irregular shift patterns. And there have been up to 25 fatalities a year and thousands injured in bus incidents in London. It is now the time to legislate. And way back in 2009, the Department for Transport conducted an extensive review of the effectiveness of the British domestic drivers' hours rules. Following that review, it was decided not to make any changes, concluding that any additional restrictions would risk imposing unreasonable burdens on the industry. 10 years on, and the burdens now lie with the drivers, not the operators. A reduction in routes served and buses has led to a reduction of 8,000 bus drivers since 2010. At the same time, their wages have fallen behind their peers, resulting in drivers working longer hours and more days to try and maintain their monthly earnings. It is clear that this issue affects drivers across the country. I have received comments from far and wide about this. By way of example, one convener reported that about a third of drivers were working more than 50 hours a week. Elsewhere, a bus driver in Cornwall who actually drives on a route which is longer than the 50 kilometres, i.e. so should come under strict EU rules for long-distance drivers, but the company splits the route into 3, so that the same driver can continue the route and they don't have to comply with the EU working hours restrictions. And in Liverpool, a driver who used to work for Stagecoach and said they were regularly forced to work 12-hour shifts day after day, which caused fatigue. Mr. Speaker, this bill proposes to limit the working hours of bus drivers and seeks simply to harmonise UK legislation by bringing consistency of working hours and restrictions between drivers on local and long-distance bus routes and for lorry drivers. It cannot be right that we have different regulation for freight vehicles and passenger vehicles. We must harmonise, we must legislate. I commend this bill to the House.
Thank you. Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Jim Cunningham, Alan Brown, Graham Morris, Ian Mearns, Mr. Marcus Jones, Mike Amesbury, Joe Platt, Anna McMorrin, Sir Peter Bottomley, Vera Hobhouse, and myself.
Matt Weston.
Bus drivers' working hours on local routes bill.
Second reading what day?
22nd of March.
22nd of March 2019.